May 2004. Life goes on. My time at Frame Art Picture Framing Galleries is coming to an end. And I read 12 books, only 2 of which are media tie-ins, which is a complete turnaround from the previous month, where of all the books I read, only 2 weren't media tie-ins. But let's see what all these books were that I read in May of 2004. The first book, Ring by Koji Suzuki. Of course, the novel that the many Ring movies are based on. A mysterious videotape. You watch it, you got 7 days to live unless you can figure out the secret to staying alive. Journalist starts investigating these mysterious deaths. Fantastic book. The movies gender swapped the characters for some reason. Don't know why. Don't have a problem with it. Just interesting that both the Japanese movie Ringu and the American remake have a female lead protagonist. But The Ring, fantastic book. Both the Japanese movie and the American movie are fantastic. The Japanese movie series is insane. You have Ringu, and then I believe a movie sequel. But with the books, there's 3 books. As far as I know, there's only 3: Ring, Loop, and Spiral, or possibly Spiral and then Loop. I don't remember the order. With the movies, they made the movie, they made a sequel to the movie, but then they also made an adaptation of the sequel book. So right off the bat, you have like 2 diverging timelines. And then I think it gets even crazier from there. I don't know if there's a sequel to the 3rd book, but there might be a sequel to the movie that's based on the 2nd book, but also sequels to the sequel that's not based on the book. It's insanity. At least I think the American movies just said, here's a movie, here's a sequel, here's another sequel. But anyway, all of that craziness is neither here nor there. All that matters to us here is that I read Ring by Koji Suzuki, and it's a fantastic book. I followed that up with Branded by Ed Gorman. This is a Western. Go from Japanese horror to a Western. Our main character is Andy Malloy, 19 years old, works as a store clerk, I think. His father, the town drunk, and Andy Malloy comes home one day and finds his stepmother murdered, shot in the head. Of course, his town drunk scoundrel of a father is the main suspect, but he's able to convince Andy that he didn't do it. And so Andy's trying to prove his father's innocence before he's executed. And I think there's a serial killer involved, because it's Ed Gorman. Even his westerns often end up being serial killer thrillers. Branded by Ed Gorman. It's a good western. It's Ed Gorman. Then we have Choice of the Cat, Book 2 of the Vampire Earth by E. Knight. When I talked about the first one, however many videos ago that was, I believe I said that I didn't enjoy it that much, and I didn't think that I had read any others in the series, which is like 11 books long. Apparently I read the 2nd book. And it's basically these aliens have taken over the Earth. They are vampiric. And these are about the main character is David Valentine, who's part of the human resistance. In the 1st book, he was trained to be part of a group of elite soldiers called the Wolves. Now he's moving on to the next elite group called the Cats, which are the super stealthy spies, saboteurs, still trying to fight off this invasion of alien vampires. I'm going to say it again. I don't think I read anything past this book. Wasn't a huge fan. But that's Choice of the Cat, Book 2 of the Vampire Earth by E. Knight. If it sounds interesting to you, no reason you shouldn't check it out. Then we have Nightingale's Lament by Simon R. Green, part of his Nightside series. I'm a moron because I didn't write down the main character's name, and I don't remember it off the top of my head, but he's a private detective who has a special ability. He can find anything. And, excuse me, in this, there's and the night side is like the flip side of London. There's secret ways to get there. It's where magic and monsters and everything exist. And our main character, there's a singer named Nightingale in the night side who has gone from sort of a pop star to singing very dark, sad songs. And after her concerts, her fans go and kill themselves. And our main character, our private detective, is hired to find the reason for what's going on. So he can use his special talent because he's been asked to find something. But great stuff. I really enjoy this series. I need to read the rest of it. I wish I should have written down the character's name. But yeah, the Nightside series by Simon R. Green is really good. Nightingale's Lament, really fun. All right, we have our first media tie-in. It is Legends of the Five Rings, the Four Winds Saga, First Scroll, Wind of Honor by Ree Soesbee. And even though it says the first scroll, it's actually the second book in a 5-book series because there was a prelude book. But it takes place in Rokugan, which is this fantasy version of Japan. And the emperor is dead. The steel throne is empty. The emperor's daughter, who is a samurai, is fighting for control, but some of the clans are clashing. This is based on a role-playing game. Different clans: the Phoenix Clan, the Lion Clan, Scorpion Clan, the Crane Clan. You would pick, if you're playing the role-playing game, you pick your clan, which gives you a general idea of what type of character you're going to be. But a fun series of books, especially if you enjoy feudal Japan and you throw in the fantasy element where there's magic and monsters and things. And again, even though it's the first scroll, the second part of a series about what happens after the emperor dies. So, Legends of the Five Rings, the Four Winds Saga, First Scroll, Wind of Honor, Ree Soesbee. Excuse me. Then we have Finder by Greg Rucka. This is the second Atticus Kodiak book, and Atticus is searching. He's a professional bodyguard or security expert. He's searching for a runaway teen, and there's a serial killer that's going to become part of the story, and it's going to get personal with Atticus. And there's something really big, if I'm not mistaken, it's in this book that something like really, really big happens that one does not necessarily expect to see in like private eye type stories. Although this series does eventually, I think, go beyond private eye type stories to thrillers. But Atticus Kodiak is a great character. Greg Rucka is a great writer. And Finder by Greg Rucka is a great book. Excuse me. Our second media tie-in is Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Tales of the Slayer, Volume 3. This is a series of short stories that focus on slayers, vampire slayers, other than Buffy. And this one has 4 authors. I had to write all this down. Christopher Golden, Nancy Holder, Mel Odom, and Yvonne Navarro. And in the 4 the 4 stories, we have a Slayer from 1250 AD, from 1866, a Slayer in the 40s in Hollywood, I believe, and a Slayer in the 90s, the predecessor to Buffy. So if you're a Buffy the Vampire Slayer fan and you like the wider world beyond just the series and what we saw there, I think these are good stories. Very interesting, especially if you like to see that history of the Vampire Slayers. So that's Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Tales of the Slayer, Volume 3. Then, I have Finder, the Greg Rucka book, but it's buried under all my Stephen King books, and I didn't feel like digging it out. I mention that because the one book that I can show you is the next book I read in May of 2004. This is possibly the 3rd time this has been on the list, at least the 2nd time, but that's Relic by Douglas Preston and Lincoln Child, the book that started it all, the book that introduced Agent Pendergast, one of the best literary characters around. And this is the New York Museum of Natural History. Margot Green is our main character. She works there. There's been a series of mysterious murders. But got to figure it out, but got to keep it quiet because there's a big exhibition opening, and Agent Pendergast investigates, works with Margot Green. It's an incredibly fantastic scientific thriller, horror scientific thriller, well worth reading. It was made into the movie, which left out Agent Pendergast, which is crazy because he's the best character in the book. Highly, highly recommended. Relic by Douglas Preston and Lincoln Child. After that, we had In the Hour Before Midnight by Jack Higgins. This is a thriller, and our main character is a guy named Stacy Wyatt, who is helped out of prison. I can't remember if it's actually an escape, but this character, Sean Burke, gets Stacy Wyatt out of prison, I believe, and because he needs his help, someone has been, this woman, very important woman, has been kidnapped by some bandits in Sicily, and Sean Burke wants Stacy Wyatt's help to save this woman, but apparently Sean Burke doesn't know that Stacy Wyatt's grandfather is the head of organized crime in Sicily. But, he's going to use his criminal contacts to find this low-life scum that's kidnapped this poor woman. Probably. Jack Higgins, great thriller writer. And this is one of his earliest. In the Hour Before Midnight, Jack Higgins. After that, we have Straczynski Unplugged by J. Michael Straczynski. This is a collection of short stories, some previously published, some original to this collection. J. Michael Straczynski, creator of Babylon 5 TV show, writer of comic books, writer of one of the most infamous Spider-Man stories of all time, and writer of prose fiction. So some of these stories are from Tales of the New Twilight Zone, and then, as I said, some of these are original to it, but they're all Twilight Zone type stories where you're going to have that, potentially have that twist at the end. A lot of morality tales. If you like the Twilight Zone, I think you'd like this collection of stories. The penultimate book for March of 2004. I don't know why I did that weird thing. The penultimate book for May of 2004 was Deathmatch by Lincoln Child. Old Lincoln writing something without Douglas. But this is a thriller, possibly a techno thriller. We have Lewis and Lindsay Thorpe who end up murdered, suicide, murder, suicide, but probably not what it looks like. And there's this company called Eden Incorporated that has a basically it's like a dating site, but they have a 99% success rate for making the perfect match. And Lindsay and Lewis were their very first perfect match. How is this all going to tie together? I don't remember the details. I think this was a fun book, and I feel like, something from Eden Corp was probably going to be exposed. I feel like maybe, do they kill people if it turns out they're not a perfect match, so they can keep saying they have a 99% success rate? I may have to reread this one because I don't remember the details. But I enjoy when Douglas Preston writes his own stuff, when Lincoln Child writes his own stuff. Although personally, I enjoy it better when they're writing together as Douglas Preston and Lincoln Child. But Deathmatch still an interesting, again, I think techno thriller. And the final book that I read in May of 2004 is called The Quick by Dan Vining. And this is a private eye novel with a twist. Our main character is Jimmy Miles, and he's what's known as a sailor, but not the type you might think. Not a member of the Navy or the Merchant Marines or any of that. Sailors are people who have died but are still alive. Not sure I can explain it properly. I can't remember if they've come back to life somehow. And people that know them or knew them when they were first alive see a different face when they look at them, so they're not recognized by anybody that knew them when they were first alive. But anyway, Jimmy Miles is one of these guys in Hollywood, and he's at a party, meets this woman who wants him to investigate the murder of her mother. Her father was convicted and executed for it, but she still believes that he didn't do it, and she wants Jimmy Miles to look into it. And so because he's not, or was dead but isn't dead anymore, he can't die now, but there's other of these sailors in the world, and some of them are evil. So you have what would feel like a straight private eye detective story, but with this supernatural twist. It's I believe it's the first book by Dan Vining, first in a series, I think. But I don't know that I read any of the others. Maybe we'll all be surprised when I go through this list some more, and we'll find out maybe I did read some more. I was wrong about the Vampire Earth books. But that's The Quick, Dan Vining, private detective with a supernatural twist. And that's everything that I read in May of 2004. So, question for this video regards your feelings of movie adaptations. How important is it to you that a movie adaptation follow the book or the source material? At what points, if they're making changes, at what point does it break the movie for you? Hopefully this question makes sense. I understand the need for changes, especially if you have a huge book that's going to take up way too much screen time. You got to cut things down. You have movies like Misery, where the biggest change, in my opinion, it's been a long time since I've read the book or seen the movie, but I think the biggest, possibly just the most dramatic change, involves a sledgehammer in the movie. That's not the way it is in the book. And initially it was kind of disappointing because I like what happens in the book, but man, what happens in the movie is pretty damn powerful too. So it's not, it doesn't bug me. Uh, a movie, sticking with Stephen King, a movie like The Mist makes a huge change at the end, much, much more powerful in the movie. Um, but let's say you're making a Superman movie and you make Clark Kent's human adopted father a stupid moron. That's annoying. It's character assassination. So I guess it depends. For me, it all depends on how intelligent the movie is, what it does with the source material. I think I'm one of the few people that enjoyed the Pet Cemetery remake. And I love the book now. Used to hate it, love it now. I like the original movie, but I like the huge change that was made in the remake. I don't like that it was spoiled in the trailers, but I'm not sure what they would have done. I think there might have been riots in the theaters if people didn't go in knowing that this big change had been made. Not saying it's a great movie, but I don't think it's a bad movie. And I also think that by making that change, it allowed for more. I'm trying to avoid saying what the change is, just in case there's anyone who hasn't seen it. Um, but making that change allowed for us to understand what happens when a person comes back after being buried in the pet cemetery. Um, so changes like that, and again, how it's handled, I think, is important. Uh, Unnecessary changes. Like, what's up with the lawnmower man? That's a. I mean, I think that's one of those cases where someone had a script and someone had access to a Stephen King title, and they just threw them together. And Stephen King sued to have his name taken off of that movie. Uh, and it's entertaining in its badness. I think I saw it in the theater, but it has nothing to do with the original Stephen King story. It's not an adaptation in any way. So again, for me, it's all a matter of how the source material is handled. Hopefully, you're not just taking the name of something and making what you want to make. But what about you? Do you even care about this stuff? As I said with the Relic, very disappointing that Pendergast, the best character, isn't in the movie, but it's still an entertaining movie. And it's fine for people who've never read the book and don't know that there's a character missing. So that's kind of a middle of the road example. Because I'd much rather it had Pendergast in it, but I don't hate it because he's not in it. But again, please share your thoughts on this, if you have any, in the comments below. If you have any comments, questions, or corrections, please put those in the comments below. Comments are open for spoilers. Just post a spoiler warning. We try to be polite here on my channel. Please like, share, and subscribe. All the usual YouTube stuff. If you care to follow me on other social media, my Twitter is @Ronan5757. My Instagram, where I post pictures of books, comic books, board games, fuzzy animals, is Eric Smith 5757. That's Eric with a K, ERIKSMITH 5757. On Blue Sky, where I almost never post, I'm @EL Smith. That's all I have for you this week. So until next week, read more books.